Hello and welcome. My name is John Locke, like the famous philosopher, but without the E. Like the former John Locke, I'm also a passionate adherent to the concepts of personal liberty and civil society. People like Locke and Rousseau proposed what has come to be known as the social contract, whereby individual citizens surrender the right to enforce the law from their own hands, placing it instead in the hands of government, provided that the government enforces the law fairly and without favour upon all citizens. If the government fails to keep its end of the bargain, the people are lawfully entitled to remove the government and replace it with one which is obedient to the common will. It is the people who are sovereign, not the government or parliament. Such a compact ought to be easy to legislate if the principles of equal rights for all were to apply. There would not be many laws required were they sensibly devised to provide such a scenario. The Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius pointed out that the more laws a society has, the more corrupt it has become. In this regard, there's a lesson for us today, I would suggest. Vladimir Lenin of the USSR once said, "Give me control of a nation's money supply and I do not care who makes the laws." He meant that if the control of money is in the hands of criminals, eventually any desired state of corruption will be enabled. For hundreds of years, banking has been controlled by criminal elements which run fraudulent financial systems, and this has led to numerous excesses of crime in many facets of society. It's become apparent in recent years that one of the worst of these has been the fraud, criminality and corruption emanating from the pharmaceutical industry. As the global population has increased by several times over the past 100 years, and acknowledging that everyone eventually dies or requires medical treatment at some stage, this industry has enjoyed unparalleled growth. With that growth has come the acquisition of influence within the community and especially within the political sphere. There is ample evidence of the exercise of untoward interference in the legislative processes of almost all nations, as well as the failure to prosecute and remedy many crimes committed by this cohort. This is not a matter of libel or slander. Massive fines have been levied and paid, and these are matters of public record going back over decades. Yet this industry and its major players have been repeatedly allowed to continue their fraudulent and criminal activities because governments, including our own in Australia, have been either dilatory or totally negligent in hauling these miscreants into line. It appears that these perpetrators have sufficient money that they can act with impunity. And this raises the inevitable question, have our politicians and bureaucrats who we pay to serve the Australian populace been suborned by bribes or backhanders into not just turning a blind eye to this latest wave of crimes, but becoming actively complicit? The evidence says yes. So what happens now? For the past 2 years at least, the governments of Australia have been acting in a criminal manner. How so? They have introduced all manner of unlawful restrictions on the movements and activities of the citizens in response to an alleged pandemic of great danger. There are numerous problems with this. The first of which is that there is no evidence as such of any pandemic. A pandemic was always previously described as an outbreak of disease which spread globally and which produced a serious number of excess deaths among the population. In 2020, the WHO changed this definition to simply refer to any outbreak which had a large number of cases. The problem here is obvious. Depending on how cases are defined, if there are no excess deaths or morbidity associated with the illness, the new definition merely enables the authorities to express any restrictions that may suit their purposes, whether these have any relationship to objective reality or not. And this is what we have seen. Wave after wave of totally irrational restrictions, often contradictory, and universally ineffective in curtailing the effects of the alleged pandemic, which of course has not yet produced any excess morbidity, even in those countries where it is alleged the effects have been most severe. Global population growth and deaths figures bear this out unequivocally. These restrictions have included mandating medical procedures such as mask wearing, social distancing, isolating or quarantining healthy individuals, and now vaccinations of dubious and evidentially harmful, often lethal experimental drugs, the ingredients of which we are not permitted to know. All such limitations upon the rights of citizens are unlawful, and under our Constitution and federal law expressly forbidden. Entire cohorts of society have become complicit in these crimes, including public servants, doctors, police, nursing home staff, and now even school teachers. The list of laws being broken is legion, beginning with the Constitution, Section 51, Paragraph 23A, which permits the provision by the Commonwealth of welfare and medical benefits, etc., but not so as to allow any form of conscription. We also have mass breaches of the Privacy Act 1988, the Disability Discrimination Act 1992, the Biosecurity Act 2015, the Australian Human Rights Commission Act 1986, the Crimes Act 1995, all Commonwealth laws which override any state laws which may conflict with them, to name but a few. This is to say nothing of the infractions of every one of the 10 articles of the Nuremberg Code 1947, some of which carry the death penalty, plus numerous other international covenants and treaties to which Australia is signatory. For a government to break so many of its own laws in the pursuit of one venture is, as far as I know, unprecedented in Australian history. It is a disgusting and shameful imposition on the rights of law-abiding citizens, and its motivation remains the subject of fierce controversy, with all manner of possible reasons for its execution being propounded by various opinion groups. But be that as it may, it is unconscionably criminal and must be fully prosecuted at law. It is by far the greatest crime ever perpetrated on the Australian people, and cannot and will not be tolerated. Yet there are vast numbers of the population who are seemingly unconcerned about their loss of freedoms, and who eagerly lap up the pronouncements of the government and whatever they hear on the mainstream media. These people wear masks even when they are not ordered to, despite masses of evidence that they not only provide no protection against viral infections, but are actively harmful in many ways to the wearer. When advised of these facts, they either don't want to hear them or brand their informant a conspiracy theorist or an anti-scientific idiot. But the time has come now when the criminals are actively seeking to push these ineffective, unnecessary and harmful injections upon young children, even though it is known that many more of them will suffer life-shortening or fatal reactions from these than they will from the disease itself. This is a despicable act, and anyone who supports such a concept of the random sacrificing of children, claiming that it's for the benefit of society, has no place in a civilized community. If such a community wishes to expel or exile those of its members who call out this unspeakable crime for the evil that it is, I, for one, am happy to be excluded from the society of such benighted souls. What is going to happen now is that the masses of evidence of these crimes having been collated, with their collection still accruing, the police stations of this nation will be served with papers which compel them under the Constitution to be investigating and prosecuting these criminals, which include some of their own number, or be lumped in with the criminals as complicit themselves. Within a few weeks, arrests will be made of all the ringleaders in these crimes, and they will stand trial in a common law court. If the police refuse to do their duty, the Constitution allows for the citizenry to perform these arrests, for it is the common law duty of all citizens, police or otherwise, to apprehend and prevent crime. The major crime here, of course, is treason, because these politicians and leaders have deliberately desecrated the Constitution in pursuing their evil agendas against the people they are supposed to protect. These people include, but are not limited to, the Prime Minister, the so-called National Cabinet, all the state premiers and territory chief ministers, the governors of each such jurisdiction, and the Governor-General. Currently, there are still far too few Australians who are willing to stand up and defend their rights and those of their children. But this will change as the disastrous effects of these mass vaccinations and the other restrictions permeate through the community. However, there are enough to carry the day, or will be in a very short while. When I first came to Australia more than 50 years ago, it had a reputation as a nation of redoubtable soldiers and fearless competitors on sporting fields all over the world. In truth, I sometimes wondered if, my main reason for coming here being to escape the cold climate of my homeland, I would be man enough to match it with this race of the fearsome reputations. Now, however, I am proud to be one of those who is prepared to put everything on the line in defence of the freedoms and rights of my children and grandchildren. I often cast my thoughts back to those brave revolutionaries of the 1770s American colonies, who went up against the greatest power of their time, wagering everything, including their lives, that they might form a nation such as John Locke had envisaged over 100 years before. I have adopted as my motto the words of the French philosopher Albert Camus: "Become so free that your very existence is an act of rebellion." I call upon all who value the freedoms won with the blood of our forebears to stand and fight for their preservation. Seek out and join one or more of the many groups carrying the battle to these despotic miscreants who are so abusive of our once fair nation.